Hello, my friends. It's been about 2 weeks since I've had a chance to pop on here. And actually, right now, sorry, I'm recording from a hotel room in London because I have a overnight layover on my way back from a conference. So this one might be a little bit scattered just because it's been a couple weeks and it's been a very full few weeks. So I think where I want to start, um, this conference I'm coming home from is actually the second one I've been to in the past couple of weeks, and I've been working at both of them, not just attending. So I've kind of been an attendee, but also working. Anyway, not what I wanted to talk about. At the first conference, at the closing keynote, and this was a social impact conference, the closing keynote speaker quoted Octavia Butler, which big fan of, and said that Octavia Butler wrote of a world that was very much a cautionary tale, as if she was saying, we're driving towards a cliff, and here's what it might look like if and when we go over the cliff. And if you've ever read Parable of the Sower or any of her other books in that world, you kind of get a sense that that world is pretty terrifying, right? And then the keynote speaker said that what they had witnessed at the conference that week had given her hope that we were collectively pulling away from the cliff, and then asked those of us who were there at the closing keynote to turn to each other and share with each other something that gave us hope that we had experienced that week, that we were not going to go off the cliff. And the guy next to me turned to me, I turned to him. We just kind of looked at each other. And I started by saying, I actually disagree with the premise of the question, because I think that we are going off the cliff, and that is just kind of a locked-in process. If you are familiar with the work of Margaret Wheatley, this is something that she talks a lot about, that we are kind of locked into an ancient cycle of societal collapse right now. And I very much believe that to be true. And there is beautiful stuff happening. There is so much reason to hope for the long-term future of humanity and the planet. And the two are not mutually exclusive. And what was so interesting at this social impact conference, where ostensibly we're all working on systemic change, blah, 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 is that the closing keynote speaker held this binary, that we are either going towards the cliff or we're pulling away. And that there was not space in the way that they phrased that closing question for the reality that we are collectively going off the cliff. And there is so much happening that may help us build wings on the way down, that may create a new world so that when we land at the bottom of the cliff, there is something waiting for us, that we're not just in a wasteland, metaphorical or literal. And I found that really, really interesting. And the two ingredients, I think, that are missing when we phrase questions in this kind of binary way around existential threats to humanity and all species on the planet and the planet itself. One ingredient is the ability to hold multiple truths simultaneously. We're going off the cliff, and there is so much beauty and so much hope. Both are true. Both stories are unfolding simultaneously. The other is there's a book, I forget who it's by, called The Four Pivots. And one of the four pivots in mindset that this book recommends, if I can remember the author, I'll put it in the show notes, is developing a longer now. And this is not a new idea, right? Indigenous peoples have been holding this idea of 7 generations, that what I do now is the seeds were planted for it 7 generations ago, and what I do today is planting the seeds that will blossom over the next 7 generations. So this longer now idea, meaning we can hold that in the next, let's call it 50 years, we're going to drive off the cliff, but in the next 150, 200, 250 years, these beautiful seeds that are being planted now will um, will grow and bear fruit. So that's something that it was a really interesting note to leave that conference on. The other thing, and this comes from this most recent conference that I went to, where I was doing a lot of things. So I was helping um, facilitate a group of facilitators who were creating experiences and facilitating groups of the um, delegates or conference attendees. So I was helping coordinate that with two other incredible people. I did breath work there. I did inner dance, sound journey. So I was kind of running around a lot. And one of the things that I was reminded of over and over again is the incredible power and eloquence of silence as the word that comes up is partner, as a partner. And so often when something happens, right, we have a conflict or we're facilitating a group and something comes up that's kind of big, that afterwards we'll feel it in our body and we'll want to process it verbally. We'll want to process it cognitively. We'll want to talk it out with a friend. So on one of the days of the conference, as we were convening as facilitators, what I invited the group to do is to simply stand across from another one of the facilitators in silence for about 4 or 5 minutes, not with any other invitation other than being in silent presence with each other. And because this is a group of like incredible facilitators and moderators, they were able to do it without, like, people will generally giggle when asked to be in silence, but they just kind of dropped in and stood across from each other, not even doing deep eye gazing, but just being in physical presence with each other. And afterwards, several folks reflected that they had felt full of things that needed to be processed or wanted to be processed, and that their inclination was going to be to process it verbally. But those 5 minutes of silence and kinship or companionship processed it completely. So they didn't need any words. It just, the body and the energy in the presence of another body and another energy knew exactly how to regulate itself and to move all of those thoughts or emotional echoes through. And it was such a powerful reminder of what we miss when we don't embrace and really listen to the space of silence. Like, really listen to the space of silence. There was maybe one more thing that I'll mention, and then I have to go catch my flight, is that I was very aware, especially at the second conference, and I'll probably be sitting with this for a while, that at any moment there are at least two and probably more than two conversations going on. So I found myself several times in conversations that felt like tactical, which, if you listen to this podcast, it's not my favorite place to have conversations all the time. But there were like these tactical, very concrete, professional, quote unquote, professional conversations that I was having about people's work and strategy, whatever. And at the same time, there was an energetic conversation happening, right? Unacknowledged, under the surface, kind of off to the side. And I was very aware that as we were talking, my energy and the other person or people's energy were in in dialogue with each other. And that conversation, and not to take away from the words that were being spoken, but that energetic conversation was much more nuanced and transformational than the words. The words, there was nothing new. Everyone more or less has the same ideas. But the energetic conversation was about hearts, vibrations. What does change look and feel like at an energetic level? And in most of the conversations that wasn't acknowledged, but a few times when it felt like people were open to it, that energetic conversation became explicit and we spoke to it. What are you experiencing as we talk about this? What shifts might be emergent for both of us? And in those moments where the energy, that energetic vibrational level was directly addressed, my whole body relaxed, like I'd been holding this artificial separation. And it was just those were like maybe 2 or 3 times the most nourishing conversations that I had at the gathering. And the rest of the time, and I had never realized it when I was in the conversations themselves, but the rest of the time, and I'm feeling myself get emotional thinking about, I think how exhausting that was to kind of artificially hold this separation where we're saying words, but they're devoid of energetic content, or we're holding the energetic content separate. And I think, the compressed or memeable version of what I'm trying to get at might be heart-centered communication, but it's more than that. It's not just in the body. And this may be the last piece that wants to come through in this moment, that heart-centered communication, the implication of it is that it's one body to another body. But something that I believe and have experienced to be true about the heart is that it's an organ of connection, not just of blood and oxygen and pumping energy into the body, but the heart is secretly connected with this world of energy. It's where all of the 4 directions and the earth and the sky and the numinous meet and combine in our body in an utterly unique way. So when I say heart-centered communication, it's not just about emotional connection. It's about how the unique expression of all of those energies that animate the creative force of the universe alchemize in my heart in a unique way. And that is in conversation with your unique expression of those same forces, so that we can learn about each other and so that consciousness can learn about itself through the interaction. And those connections are the ones that are so nourishing and transformational. When we connect in that way, not just body to body or my energy to your energy, but the unique expression of the universe through me and the unique expression of the universe through you coming into interaction with each other, transformation and change can happen so quickly and beautifully and in surprising and delightful ways. And I'm not suggesting that we should communicate or be in that space all the time. There was someone at the conference, we had a beautiful moment, one of those very heart, in the way that we're talking about it here, centered moments. And then, he had a moment where he looked at me and said, we don't always have to be, this was a beautiful moment, but we don't always have to, we could just like hang out. And that's beautiful too. But I love the idea that we can co-create and agree what kind of space we want to be in with each other. We just want to, let's just hang out. Can we just it's sort of like be otters floating on the ocean? Or we can explicitly say, hey, let's have a moment where we really consciously connect all the parts of ourselves. And at conferences, most of the time we don't do that. We're there, even though, the design principle of the conference might be something like community and connection. We're not creating the ritual spaces or powerful containers to hold in a safe and good way those deeper connections. So those are some thoughts that I'm holding as I literally put on my socks to head to the airport and hopefully get back to the US today. All right, my friends, thank you so much as always, and I look forward to being back at a more regular cadence once I'm back home.